Have you ever put on a leather jacket without really knowing where it comes from? Not the country of origin printed on a label, not the brand embroidered on the lining, but the exact animal that walked across the desert before becoming the garment now hanging in your closet. Most people never ask that question. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the industry prefers that you don't. Because if you knew what happens between the moment a camel crosses the Saharan dunes and the instant a leather jacket appears carefully wrapped in tissue paper inside a matte black box with a gold-embossed luxury logo, you might never look at fashion the same way again. Today, we're going where almost nobody goes. We're walking through the doors of one of the largest camel leather processing factories in the world. We're going to see the machines, the chemical baths, the tanning chambers, the calloused hands of the workers, and the processes that transform a raw, heavy, crude hide into the softest, most durable, and most coveted material in international high fashion. Camel leather has been one of the best-kept secrets in the luxury textile industry for centuries. For decades, the great fashion houses of Milan, Paris, and Madrid have used this material in their most exclusive collections without making too much noise about it. Not because it's illegal, not because it's scandalous in itself, but because the production chain that transforms a desert animal into a luxury article is so complex, so raw, and so fascinating at the same time, that the industry prefers to keep it out of the public eye. Today, that changes. Because what you're about to see here, in this complete tour of the production line, is a process that very few cameras have ever been able to record. A process that blends thousand-year-old tradition with cutting-edge industrial technology. A process that takes place in facilities that don't appear on Google Maps and that don't receive tourist visits. Facilities that produce millions of dollars in material every year and supply the most recognized brands on the planet without their final customers ever knowing what lies behind that incomparable softness. The camels that supply these factories come primarily from the Maghreb region, the countries of the Horn of Africa and the steppes of Central Asia. The dromedaries of northern Morocco, Mauritania and Mali are especially valued for the particular texture of their skin, which develops a unique fibrous density as a result of years of exposure to extreme heat, sand, and cyclical dehydration. That skin, which has withstood temperatures of 120 degrees in the shade, that has carried loads of hundreds of pounds for weeks, that has survived conditions that would destroy any other animal tissue, is precisely the skin that luxury factories search for so relentlessly. Because that extreme resistance, once properly processed, becomes a product characteristic that no synthetic material can replicate. If you thought you already knew everything there was to know about leather, wait until you see what comes next. If this kind of content gives you the same fascination it gives us, drop a comment right now telling us which part of the process blows your mind the most. Is it the origin of the animal, the chemical transformation, the final finish? Your engagement helps us keep bringing you these revelations that the industry would rather you never saw. Hit the like button if you want us to keep opening these forbidden doors, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video, because what's coming is even more shocking than this. The process begins long before the hide ever reaches the factory. It begins at collection centers, discrete facilities located on the outskirts of cities like Fez, Marrakech, Agadir, and Casablanca, where middlemen purchase fresh hides from regional slaughterhouses and sort them according to a quality scale that takes into account thickness, tissue uniformity, the absence of scars, and the estimated age of the animal. Hides from young camels between 2 and 4 years old are the most prized. They have a perfect balance of flexibility and density that makes them ideal material for fine leather goods. Hides from adult animals, thicker and with a greater presence of natural markings, are destined for applications where the rustic texture and wild character of the material are precisely what is being sought. In any case, all hides go through a first manual inspection in which specialized workers examine every square inch with their hands and with direct light, searching for defects that could compromise the performance of the material in the later stages. Once sorted, the hides are subjected to a temporary preservation process that prevents decomposition during transport. This process can involve the use of rock salt in large quantities applied directly onto the inner surface of the hide, forming a dense layer that draws out residual moisture and halts bacterial activity. The salted hides are stacked in piles up to 6 feet high, covered with waterproof tarps, and kept in that condition for periods ranging from a few days to several weeks, depending on the logistics of each factory. When they finally arrive at the tanning facility, the first step is to remove that salt and rehydrate the hide in large, clean water tanks where it soaks for hours. This rehydration bath is the hide's first contact with industrial machinery, and from that moment on, there is no turning back. The modern tanneries where camel leather is processed at industrial scale are facilities that combine elements of heavy chemistry with an almost surgical precision. The large wooden or stainless steel rotating drums, which can measure up to 13 feet in diameter, are the heart of the operation. Inside them, the hides spin for hours submerged in carefully calibrated chemical solutions that gradually transform their molecular structure step by step. The hair removal process, technically known as liming, involves the use of sodium sulfide and lime that soften and dissolve the hair root without attacking the collagen of the dermis. The result is a hide completely clean of hair, but still raw, still untanned, still a biological material that would decompose within days if the next step of the process were not immediately applied. What comes next is what definitively transforms an organic hide into leather. Tanning is the process that stabilizes the collagen of the dermis and converts it into a durable, flexible, and imputrescible material. There are 2 major families of tanning used in high-end camel leather factories. Vegetable tanning, which uses extracts from bark and tannin-rich fruits, is the traditional method that produces a firm leather with a natural patina that improves with use, and it is the preferred method for leather goods like wallets, bags, and belts. Chrome tanning, faster and more predictable in its results, produces a softer, more uniform leather better suited for garments like jackets and coats. In the most advanced factories, combinations of both methods are used to achieve specific characteristics that the client brand's designers have requested with millimeter precision. After tanning, the hides come out of the drums with a characteristic bluish or greenish color, an appearance that looks almost alien to anyone seeing it for the first time, and that bears no resemblance to the final product. At this point, they are subjected to a mechanical wringing process that eliminates excess moisture through pressure rollers, followed by a shaving process that uses rotating blades to even out the hide thickness to fractions of a millimeter. This step is critical because thickness directly determines how the material will behave during the garment-making phase. Leather that is too thick will be stiff and uncomfortable. Leather that is too thin will lack the necessary resistance. The workers who operate the shaving machines work with precision gauges and constantly adjust parameters based on the individual characteristics of each hide. Did you imagine that behind a simple leather jacket there was a level of technical precision comparable to the aerospace industry? Because what you are watching is not romantic craftsmanship, it is heavy industry disguised as luxury. Drop a comment and let us know if this has changed your perspective on the leather products you have at home. The dyeing process is where the factory starts to look like something out of an alchemy laboratory. The hides, already tanned and shaved, are loaded back into the drums, along with dye solutions that can be mineral, vegetable, or synthetic in origin, depending on the color requirements of the client. The control of temperature, pH, and rotation time during dyeing determines how deeply and uniformly the color penetrates. Luxury brands demand a chromatic consistency that tolerates no variations greater than fractions of a unit on the color tolerance scale. Lab technicians present at the factory take samples from each drum and analyze them with spectrophotometers before approving the batch to move to the next phase. A batch that does not pass that inspection is sent back through the dyeing process, regardless of the cost in time and materials that entails. Once dyed and approved, the hides move to the finishing zone, which is probably the most spectacular section of the entire factory. Here, high-pressure machines apply surface layers of polymers, pigments and lacquers through atomization systems that create perfectly homogeneous finishes. Some hides receive distressed aging treatments that are paradoxically the most difficult to achieve in a uniform manner. Others undergo embossing processes that imprint artificial textures onto the surface, imitating the grains of other animals or creating exclusive patterns designed by the brands themselves. And the most exclusive ones, those destined for haute couture collections, receive hand-finished treatments in which specialized artisans apply layers of wax, natural oils, and patinas using techniques refined over decades that are not documented in any publicly accessible technical manual. The final quality control is the last filter before the material leaves the factory. In a room illuminated with high-intensity white light that reveals every imperfection invisible under normal light, specialized inspectors examine each hide on both sides. They measure, fold, stretch, and smell the material. They verify color fastness, finish uniformity, tissue flexibility, and the absence of structural defects. Approved hides are measured with optical scanners that calculate the exact surface area in square decimeters, the figure that will determine the invoiced price to the client. Rejected hides are separated and redirected to secondary markets or used for lower-value byproducts. In a factory of this caliber, the rejection rate in the final inspection can range between 8 and 15% of total production, a cost absorbed without question because the reputation of the final product allows for no compromises. What leaves that factory is not simply leather. It is the result of weeks of work, dozens of chemical and mechanical processes, thousands of technical decisions made by professionals who have dedicated their lives to mastering a craft that few people know and that almost nobody values at its true worth. The next time you touch a piece of camel leather, you will know exactly what you are holding in your hands. And the question we leave you with today is this. After seeing everything that goes into this process, would it change your decision about whether or not to buy luxury leather goods? Answer below, because that conversation is worth having.